Welcome back, minors. My name is Tracy Kriegel, and I'm a counselor here at Student Wellbeing.
And my name's Amber Johnston. I'm also a counselor here at Student Wellbeing, and it's time for your morning cup of joe. So, Tracy, how familiar are you with Pokemon?
Oh my gosh, I can tell you it's just part of our family. If you know Cuba, Missouri, if you travel around the murals, it's like almost a nightly thing for our family. So if you're around Recline Auditorium, there's like a truck around there, and you can, throw your Pokemon balls, and like anytime there's a new Pokemon released, yep, our family's there all the time.
Right. I know. I have all boys, and they are very, 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 very much into Pokemon. So for my middle child, I go out and catch Pokemon, and then I give them to him, and then I upload them to like Pokemon Home, and then he uploads them to his games. He has Scarlet and Sword and something else, and he uploads them in there, and then he uses them to play his games. Right. So yeah.
My husband is a huge Pokemon player, has been ever since it was released.
Right. So what's really interesting, and the point I wanted to get to today, is that we can learn a lot about how to manage our interpersonal relationships from the game of Pokemon, and how the different Pokemon are different, but they're still valuable even in their differences. And it also can help us with our own self-esteem and how we feel about ourselves. So I want to start a little bit by explaining a little bit about the franchise for anyone who isn't familiar with it. Pokemon is a franchise of cartoons and movies and video games, and it's got a card game and a series, the series of video games in which you play what's called a trainer. And the trainer has these things called Pokeballs, and they use to catch these Pokemon. And Pokemon are pocket monsters, and they're these little, I guess you call them animals. I don't know what you would call them. And they have different abilities based on and there's different types. And you catch them, and then you use them to battle each other in order to become a very good Pokemon trainer and who has strong Pokemon, which that was a really roundabout explanation, but
right,
you get the gist of it.
Yep.
Sometimes you're playing against other players, sometimes you're playing against the computer, but either way, it's a strategy game in which you pick the Pokemon based on the battle that you're playing. And each Pokemon has strengths and weaknesses based on its type and individual, and they all kind of almost have their own personalities too.
Right.
So you can even end up with two Pokemon that are the same type of Pokemon and the same level, but have different attacks, just depending on how you level that Pokemon up. And even in the card game, I was helping my middle child organize his Pokemon cards, and he had two Pokemon that were of the same type, and I had to file them separately because they had different attacks. They were the same type, same level, different attacks. Or sometimes you'll have the same type that's different levels, even in the card game.
Right. So they look similar. They look similar, but they do different things.
Right. And they'll even have a different picture on the card, and they make them a little bit different, but you have to really pay attention because they're different Pokemon.
Right. And, I think that's interesting because, at certain times of the year, they have the same animal that comes out, but it's a special animal with special powers.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Gosh, it was several years ago. I don't remember what it was. It was like a snake or something. I don't remember what it was that came out. It was around Halloween time, and it had all these special powers, and everybody was out looking for it. My husband was like, I want to get that one. So it was pretty cool. So it was we were in Chicago at the time, and so we were out looking for it on the streets of Chicago.
Oh man, that sounds like a blast, going out on the streets of Chicago and looking for that Pokemon. I did one last summer, and it was some digital thing. I don't remember what it was, but he wouldn't transfer to the game. And so, like I said, my Pokemon playing is 99.9% collect. I don't get to keep them. I take them home, and then my son goes through my phone, is like, what'd you catch today? And then he steals them. He's like, give me this one and give me this one.
Yeah. My husband will get frustrated because his Pokeball bag will get full. So then, you're trying to fight, you want to go to the gym, or you're wanting to fight an animal and the bag's full. So then you got to get rid of stuff. Because you can't go fight, can't get more animals. You can't get more because your bag's full. So you got to get rid of stuff so you can get new stuff.
Right. Yeah. People are kind of like Pokemon. Mm-hmm. Not saying that we can like electrocute and shoot water and do all those kind of things. More like in the way that we're very individual.
Yes.
And sometimes we're good at certain things, and sometimes we're not good at other things.
Oh my gosh, I'm so thinking about calculus right now.
Right.
Yep, trig. Some of those classes are really hard. So, you might be good at algebra, but then as you get in more advanced math classes, they get a little bit harder.
Right. I always did great in like geometry, but algebra, calculus, I just could not wrap my head around.
It's tough.
And I'm not a math person. That's why I became a therapist. But I couldn't wrap my head around it. And then other people are going to have an easier time picking it up because that's the way their brain thinks.
Right. Yeah. And I think tutors and some professors just have an excellent way of explaining it to us. And once they get that right professor or a tutor that can really help you, it just like clicks.
Yes.
And your brain goes, oh, okay, I got that.
But that doesn't mean that you're any less worthy or less intelligent or less anything else than somebody else that comes along and they get it the first time.
Right.
It just means your brain thinks different and you had to have that knowledge presented in a different way, or maybe you needed to think about it. Yeah. And doesn't mean that you're not going to be successful in your career later on, or you're going to have a harder time getting a job. No. We are more than just our skills. We are, when we look at ourselves as just worthy or unworthy based on our abilities, then we kind of think of ourselves as like two-dimensional people. And so we want to think about ourselves as three-dimensional. I'm more than just my ability in calculus. I'm my ability in all of things. I might be a very good people person, or I might be somebody that's very good at having attention to detail, or maybe I'm very good at computers. All of those things can translate into like employable skills.
Right.
So when the employer wants to build a team, he's going to be looking at all the pieces of that. He's going to be looking at the people that are better with have better people skills, the people who are good at delegating things. Maybe they want to get the person that has a big picture. They want to build the team with all of those pieces put together, not just the one person. Maybe they have somebody that's really good at thinking out of the box and being creative. They're going to want that as part of their team too. So just looking at it just as a dimension of just my calculus ability or just my ability in this one particular subject is really selling myself short.
Right. So you're kind of like building that Pokemon team.
Right.
Right. Employers have to build their teams, right?
Yes.
Yeah. You want strong teams. Just like you want that strong Pokemon team.
Yes.
Yeah, you've got to power.
Yeah, you've got to pull from all the different types. You don't want to go in and have all electric type Pokemon going into a battle, because then if you get a type that's immune to electric attacks, then you're defenseless.
Right.
So when you build your team to go into a battle, you want to take a variety of types of people, just like an employer wants to take a variety of types of people into their employ.
Right. You want your logical thinkers, you want your out-of-the-box thinkers. Every person on the team is important.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and I think that from all the way, there's different classes of employees, and I always think about when I come into the office, I appreciate every person that's on this team. Whether it's the janitor, whether it's a housekeeper, whether it's the executive, who's ever in this office, we're all here. We're all important. It doesn't matter what role we play, and the computer analyst, everybody who's here is important, and we build this team. I think that's what's important. So, whoever's the team lead, is important. So if you're on that Pokemon team, they're important, but whoever's in this team is equally important. So yeah, it's such a great thing valuable roles that we have. So.
And I like to use this analogy when we're talking about getting along with difficult people, because if I know that, let's say we're going to use our made up person, and that person's name's Steve. Mm-hmm. So let's say that Steve's weakness is that he lacks initiative if he's not directed, then I can make sure that his tasks are always spelled out and clear for him. So I'm meeting Steve where he's at. I'm realizing what his weaknesses are. And instead of getting upset about that weakness, I'm moving to adapt to it. And I'm working around it. So if I know that my coworker, quote, quote, Beth, tends to be negative, I know to expect her to be negative and not to take what she says personally, that's going to be her knee-jerk reaction to anything. She's going to be critical. And so I want to just brush it off, because I know she'll come around later, but initially she's going to be very critical of anything we say. And some people are just like that.
Right. Yeah. People can change. Mm-hmm. But we have to acknowledge that. Yes. And not be so stuck in our own personal view of things are never going to change. Right. They're always going to be this way. And we have to look at the view from our viewpoint. If we take that negative standpoint too, then we're just adding to the negativity.
Right. But we also, when people absolutely can 100% change, but if somebody's personality is a given way, and if let's say, we're going to use an example here. Let's say you're married and your husband has never been romantic a day in his life. Okay. What makes you think after 25 years of marriage that he's going to come home and sweep you off your feet?
Probably not going to happen.
Probably not going to happen. Yep. So if somebody every single day, they show that their knee-jerk reaction is to be hypercritical of everything initially and then kind of warm up to it over time, that's just part of their personality. Right. And me getting offended by that is just going to make my life harder. Right. So all I need to do is just kind of, okay, she's going to initially be negative, brush it off. She's going to come around and warm to it after she thinks about it. And that's just the way some people's brain works. Mm-hmm. And the same thing, let's go back to Steve. Some people just don't have that ability. And maybe Steve could develop that if he chose to work on that and work on his initiative. But on a day-to-day basis, if he surprises me in taking the initiative, then great. Mm-hmm. Let's celebrate that. But will I get mad when he doesn't, if that's the way he's been every single day?
Right, sure. Yeah, and I think it's important for us to recognize that our reaction to other people is how we respond. Mm-hmm. And so if Beth or Steve are having these difficult dispositions, and we recognize that, if we accept those dispositions upon ourselves, it's going to have a negative impact on us. Right. But like you said, we recognize them, we just brush it off. At the end of the day, if we go home and we go, oh my gosh, this was the most horrible day, that's our interpretation.
Yes.
And we accept it, then we're going to feel negative. But if we, like you say, brush it off, we could go, that's not me. Mm-hmm. I'm okay with that. I can accept that Steve was having a bad day, or, Beth's always negative, but I'm not negative.
Right.
My personality is positive.
Yes.
So I can go back to my office and just go, okay, I'm going to breathe in awareness, and I'm going to exhale softness, and I'm going to go about my day, and I'm going to do my positive little things over here, do some critical thinking, do my tasks, and I'm going to go about my day.
Right. Yeah. It's accepting and letting go of your own feelings too, not just other people's. Mm-hmm. But you can look at people's actions and say, okay, that's just their reaction. Mm-hmm. And you're going to have coworkers that at some point in your career that absolutely are not ones to rush to do their work, we shall say. I think we've all had those at some point.
Right.
And if you know that, then you can step back and instead of getting mad about it and getting angry, what can I do to set my personal boundaries to keep myself safe in this situation instead of allowing them to come in and step on me?
Right.
So instead of getting angry and disappointed, we just expect the other person to act like the way that they've acted. And if they surprise us, they surprise us.
Yeah. Which people do.
Yeah, they absolutely
Absolutely they do. Yeah.
Like you come in some days and it's like, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want you to also relate this not only, because we talked about this in a work environment, but let's relate it to a family environment or a friend even. So your mom that worries all the time, the most likely she's going to continue to worry and worry too much about you and ask a lot of questions about what you're doing.
I bet there's a lot of people out there right now going, a worrying mom? I've never heard of that. No.
Never.
Never had a worrying mom.
But if you know that your mom is one to worry, then you can take steps instead of getting the third degree. I can take steps to make sure that my mom feels a little bit reassured, and then that calms her down, which makes my life a little easier.
Right.
We can't change how other people act. All we can change is our response to it. And that often can totally change the dynamic of the relationship.
True. Very true.
So if it's a serious thing, what can we do to set a boundary?
Be firm.
Absolutely.
And set those fence posts.
Yeah, and we've talked about that before, that the fence is in our Jurassic Park episode.
Yeah.
We talked about having the fence and then having the fence posts.
Right. Yeah, they've got to be concreted in. They've got to be set firm, because if a fence post is not concreted in, it's just going to blow away. If storm comes, it's just going to be gone.
And the fence post is our fancy way of explaining the consequences of your actions. We want to set consequences of what is my next step if they don't uphold the boundary.
Right. Yep.
So what about with yourself? What can we do with ourselves?
We've got to be kind.
Yeah.
Give ourselves kindness. Give ourselves grace.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think we give ourselves enough grace. And I know a lot of the students here definitely don't, because they're used to excelling and they're used to being the best all the time at everything. And then they come here and it's a very competitive environment. And so I see a lot of students being really hard on themselves. And so just because I struggle in one area like calculus doesn't mean that I'm unworthy or that I'm not smart enough or that I don't deserve to be here.
Right. I think we own our strengths and we own our weaknesses, and there's no shame in that. Yeah. So if I have struggle getting out of bed in the morning, I learn to set the alarm clock. Yeah. And so we learn to compensate where we need to.
Right.
Right. So if we have issues being on time, get in the habit of putting appointments on your calendar for 15 or 20 minutes early. I have seen this so many times where people are the perpetual late person. It's kind of like, how do you help those people be on time?
Right.
Figure that out and get yourself to be the on-time early person.
Well, and it's different for every person because some people do what I call clock math, and they'll set their clocks all like 15 minutes above, and then they automatically will do clock math and subtract the 15 minutes. So then they're still late because they've subtracted out the 15. So that tactic doesn't work for them, but we've got to figure out what does.
Yes.
Like what works for you. Is it, it's one thing I've always struggled with. But for me, I get up obscenely early. Like, that sounds strange. But getting up really super early actually helps me be on time because then I have a time, like, I can be slow about getting dressed.
Right. Yeah.
But it's a compensation that I've learned over years that I just don't move fast in the morning.
Sure. Because our family always gets so rushed. If there's a big family event, I always tell them to tell us to be there a half hour earlier.
Yeah.
So I'll be on time. it just works. It works great for us because then we know if the party starts at 5, tell us to be there at 4:30, and we'll be there by 5.
Yeah.
So it just
and then
helps.
you know, then you're there on time.
We're on time, so it works out well. So if you're that person, and you know, make sure you tell yourself to be there at a different time, so that you're always on time.
Well, and sometimes we have actual legitimate like limitations. Like I'm hard of hearing, and so when we have real serious limitations, we have to learn to compensate for those. So there are little things that I do on a daily basis to compensate for that. And we all have limitations in different areas. We just have to learn to work around them. But we don't have to beat ourselves up over them.
Right. Exactly.
Nobody's perfect, but every single one of us hold value.
I can't agree with you more on that. That's so wonderful. So,
and it's all about just finding the place we fit in, the team that we fit in, the group of friends that we fit in with. Like, it's just finding our place.
Right. Exactly. It makes me think about the old song, "This Little Light of Mine." I'm gonna let it shine.
Right.
Hide it under a bushel. No.
Yeah.
It's just an old song that you sung a long, long time ago. But we have to let our light shine. And, we have to be bright in this world because, this world will just dampen us out and darken us if we just, don't come out of our shells sometimes and just be bright and shine, because when anxiety and depression and hopelessness and helplessness just kind of darkens us, we do have to recognize that we are worthy. We've got value. And when you get overwhelmed with stress and anxiety and you go, oh my gosh, I didn't get an A on that test.
Right.
And I've got a B. And I just can't believe I've let myself down. Or things just aren't working out the way I thought that they would. Or, I'm on campus for the first time. I'm a freshman. This is my first year. And I'm struggling, with being away from home. Or, I can't figure out where this is at or that's at on campus. And I'm just kind of not figuring out how to do things like I used to. Sometimes that light gets a little bit darker.
Right.
And it's hard. And so, but you are worthy. You just have to recognize that a lot of times it's that mind thought. And we have to just recognize that it's a part of who we are. And it's that negative piece, that negative thinking that kind of comes out in us. And you're not there alone.
Right.
Yeah.
And so think of yourself like one of those little Pokemon.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you have the ability going through and you can level up and you can gain your skills and you can do all these things. But you can also find the place that you fit in and thrive the best.
Absolutely.
And you will absolutely 100% find it. And you'll find your way of getting there. And you have value. All the Pokemon have value depending on the situation that you're in.
Right. Absolutely.
So, okay. Well, thank you for joining us this week, guys. And we will see you next week.
Take care.
For more information about mental health and wellness, contact Student Wellbeing at 204 Norwood Hall. And you can also give us a call at 573-341-4211.
The song Happy Days is brought to us by music from www.free-stock-music.com. You can also add and follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook using our handle at S&T Wellbeing.